You are living inside a digital panopticon where the walls are made of dynamic pricing algorithms that constantly monitor your vital signs to determine exactly how much blood can be extracted from your veins before you go into shock. And the average check is not a statistic, but a prison cell measured to the millimeter of your financial tolerance. You must understand that in the eyes of the modern corporate machine, you are not a human being with desires and needs. You are a yield management unit, a biological resource to be harvested with maximum efficiency. And every time you walk into a store or open a browser, you're entering a battlefield where a supercomputer has already simulated your defeat 1,000,000 times before you even see the first price tag. The concept of the average check is the mechanism by which the system standardizes your slavery, calculating the precise amount of capital required to keep you pacified but poor, ensuring that you spend exactly enough to feel the dopamine hit of consumption without spending enough to trigger the survival panic that would make you stop. They have mapped your pain of paying, the literal neural firing in your insula that registers financial loss as physical pain, and they have designed the entire transaction process to anesthetize this pain using credit cards, one-click ordering, and subscription models that decouple the act of consumption from the act of payment, effectively turning you into a financial zombie who eats without tasting and bleeds without feeling. The limit of tolerance is the exact dollar amount where your rational brain wakes up and says, this is too much. And the marketer's job is to push you right up to that edge without crossing it, keeping you in a state of maximal extractable revenue where you are constantly broke but never quite desperate enough to revolt. This is achieved through the psychological violence of anchoring, where they show you a ludicrously expensive option. First, not because they expect you to buy it, but to shatter your reference frame so that the average option, which is still overpriced, feels like a victory of your own intelligence, when in fact you have just been herded into the exact pen they built for you. You think you are making a choice, but you are a rat running through a maze where every turn has bbeen predetermined by A/B testing, conducted on millions of other rats who died, broke so that the algorithm could learn how to trap you. The trap lies in the normalization of the upgrade, the subtle coercion that convinces you that the base model is for failures, and that a sovereign king would surely add the extra topping, the extended warranty, or the premium tier, exploiting your insecurity and your desire for status to extract an extra 20% margin that you didn't plan to spend. They track your wallet share, knowing exactly what percentage of your income goes to housing, food, and entertainment, and they view any unspent money in your account as a system error, a leakage that must be plugged with a new need that they will invent and insert into your consciousness using targeted ads that prey on your specific anxieties. The average check is a thermostat. If you start spending less, they turn up the heat with discounts and urgency triggers. Only two left. If you start spending more, they silently raise the prices in your specific geolocation because the data shows you are price insensitive. You are fighting a war against an enemy that has infinite data, infinite patience, and zero morality. An enemy that sees your bank account as its own property that you are merely holding for safekeeping. When you accept the average check, when you order the combo meal, subscribe to the recommended plan, or buy the best value bundle, you are surrendering your cognitive sovereignty and allowing an algorithm to dictate the burn rate of your life. The trap is seductive because it is comfortable. It requires no thinking to spend the average amount. It feels normal to bleed at the same rate as the herd. But this normalcy is the anesthesia of the slaughterhouse. To break the trap, you must become a statistical anomaly, a data ghost, who spends zero or spends strategically, refusing to react to the stimuli of sales, colors, and carefully engineered deals. You must realize that every time you feel good about a purchase, that feeling was engineered in a boardroom 6 months ago by a team of behavioral psychologists who dissected your impulses and weaponize them against your future. The limit of tolerance is not a fixed line. It is a variable that they are constantly trying to expand, stretching your definition of acceptable loss until you are willing to pay a premium for air, for water, for the very right to exist in the ecosystem they control. You are being conditioned to view $5 for a coffee as normal, $1,000 for a phone as mandatory, and $50 for a t-shirt as a steal. And this conditioning is the invisible chain that binds you to the wheel of labor, forcing you to work harder to feed a consumption habit that was implanted in your brain by a screen. The average check is the tax on your ignorance. It is the fee you pay for living on autopilot. The sovereign architect smashes the autopilot. He does not have an average check because he does not have average behavior. He is binary. He buys nothing, zero, or he buys the asset that builds the empire, one. He rejects the middle class of consumption, the mediocre, the comfortable, the good enough, because he knows that the middle is where the slaughter happens. The algorithm cannot predict a man who does not seek comfort. It cannot extract revenue from a man who finds pain in waste and pleasure in deprivation. By lowering your tolerance for waste to zero, you become invisible to their radar. You become a glitch. The marketer looks at your profile and sees a black hole where a consumer should be. They try to bait you with exclusive offers, but you do not bite because you know that exclusive just means exclusively designed to drain you. You see the price tag not as a number, but as a coordinate in the matrix of control, and you refuse to occupy that coordinate. You step off the grid of value extraction and stand in the void of accumulation. The average check is the shackle. The limit of tolerance is the length of the chain. Break the chain by refusing to play the game of perceived value. Value is not what they say it is. Value is what remains in your pocket to build the citadel. Every dollar you refuse to give them is a brick in your own wall. Every impulse you suppress is a victory against the machine. You are not a consumer. You are a vault. Close the door. The second phase of the algorithmic dismantling of your financial sovereignty requires you to confront the humiliating truth that your free will in the marketplace is nothing more than a predictable variable in a mathematical equation known as asymmetric dominance, or the decoy effect, which is the psychological weapon marketers use to herd you into the slaughterhouse of higher margins by presenting you with a deliberately broken option designed solely to make the expensive option look like the rational choice of a genius. You walk into the cinema and see a small popcorn for $3 and a large for $7, and your brain correctly identifies that 7 is expensive, but then the architect of extraction inserts the decoy, a medium popcorn for $6.50, and suddenly the large is no longer expensive. It is a deal, because for only 50 cents more you get double the volume, and you buy the large not because you are hungry, but because you are terrified of being the idiot who bought the medium, completely missing the fact that the entire pricing structure was engineered to make you spend $7 on 10 cents worth of corn and salt. This is the hallucination of value, where they manipulate the context to warp your perception of reality, placing a $200 bottle of wine on the menu not to sell it, but to make the $80 bottle, which is their target high-margin item, appear modest and reasonable by comparison, anchoring your expectations to a ceiling that they artificially constructed so that you feel relief when you spend $80 instead of pain. You are trapped in the illusion of choice, a carefully curated labyrinth where every path leads to the same destination, the extraction of your capital. When you stand in the aisle or scroll through the pricing tiers of a software subscription, you are not acting as an independent agent. You are a lab rat running through a Skinner box where the levers are labeled Basic, Pro, and Enterprise, and they know that your fragile ego cannot bear to be basic because you identify as a high performer. So you upsell yourself to Pro to signal your status to a machine that does not care about your identity, only your credit card number. The Pro tier is the trap for the ambitious fool who equates spending money with making progress, believing that by paying the higher price, he is somehow absorbing the competence of the tool, when in reality, he is just renting a slightly larger cage. They weaponize your own decision fatigue against you, bombarding your prefrontal cortex with micro-choices. Do you want insurance? Add fries? Round up for charity? Until your executive function is so depleted that you enter a state of compliance trance, where you simply nod and tap yes to make the questioning stop, allowing them to attach parasitic fees to your transaction like barnacles on the hull of a sinking ship. The entire architecture of the average check depends on the momentum of the open wallet. They know that the hardest part of the sale is getting you to reach into your pocket, but once the wallet is open and the card is exposed, you are in a state of financial vulnerability where the pain of spending additional dollars drops to near zero, which is why the checkout aisle, digital or physical, is lined with high-margin impulse traps designed to catch the loose change of your attention before you can escape. You think you are buying a product, but you are actually buying a dopamine spike to soothe the anxiety of the transaction, and they have calculated the exact add-on price that triggers this soothing effect without waking up your logical brain, usually roughly 20% of the core purchase price. A micro-transaction that feels negligible in the moment but compounds into a macro disaster over a lifetime. They use bundling to obscure the individual price of items, mixing the gold with the garbage so you cannot calculate the true cost of what you are consuming, forcing you to pay for things you don't want just to get the one thing you need, effectively taxing you for the privilege of access. This is the gamification of poverty, where they give you points, miles, and cashback to distract you from the fact that you are bleeding out. These rewards are not gifts. They are the breadcrumbs leading you deeper into the forest, conditioning you to chase the artificial high of leveling up your consumer status while your net worth levels down. The marketer views you as a lifetime value, LTV metric, a stream of revenue to be optimized over decades, and they use subscription models to turn the acute pain of a one-time purchase into the chronic dull ache of a monthly fee that you eventually forget exists, allowing them to siphon your blood while you sleep, creating a parasitic bond that is harder to break than a marriage. You must understand that every best value sticker, every most popular tag, and every limited time offer is a psychological trigger pulled by a sniper who has studied your biology better than you have. They know that the fear of missing out, FOMO, is a stronger driver than the desire for gain, so they manufacture artificial scarcity to bypass your logic circuits and hijack your amygdala, forcing you to buy now or risk the pain of loss. To escape this, you must reject the frame entirely. You must understand that the menu is a lie. The tiers are a lie. The deal is a lie. The only truth is the asset you own and the money you keep. When you encounter the decoy, you must laugh at the clumsiness of the trap. When you see the upsell, you must feel contempt for the attempt to manipulate your fatigue. You must adopt the zero-option mindset. If the product does not serve the mission of the sovereign architect with absolute precision, the answer is not basic or pro. The answer is none. You do not negotiate with the menu. You dictate your needs. If the system tries to force you into a bundled extraction, you walk away. You would rather starve than eat the poison they dressed up as a feast. The marketer counts on your politeness, your fatigue, and your desire to fit in. Be rude, be energetic, be an outlier. Shatter the average check by spending zero. The silence of your closed wallet is the only sound that terrifies the machine. The final phase of liquidating the consumer parasite requires you to abandon the childish notion that you can control your spending through willpower alone, and instead engage in the surgical amputation of your ability to transact, because willpower is a finite metabolic resource that depletes with every decision you make throughout the day, meaning that by 8 p.m. your prefrontal cortex is exhausted and you are biologically incapable of resisting the algorithm's seduction. You must implement a protocol of high-friction existence, where you deliberately sabotage the convenience that the system has engineered to drain you, starting with the digital vasectomy of your financial life, which involves ruthlessly unlinking your credit cards from every single browser, app, and subscription service to reintroduce the friction of manual entry. The system banks on the one-click mechanic to bypass your logic circuits, so you must counter this by forcing yourself to physically stand up, find your wallet, and type out the 16 digits every single time you want to buy something. A process that creates a soften-up interval where the dopamine spike of the impulse has time to degrade into the shame of the reality. You must treat your saved payment methods not as conveniences, but as open wounds in your financial torso that are bleeding you dry, and you must stitch them shut. Furthermore, you must undergo the cash conversion therapy for all physical transactions, withdrawing your weekly limit of tolerance in physical paper currency and leaving the cards locked in a safe at home, because the human brain registers the parting of physical cash as a form of somatic injury, pain, whereas swiping a plastic card feels like nothing and tapping a phone feels like magic. By forcing yourself to hand over the physical tokens of your labor, you reconnect the neural pathway between work and expense, making you viscerally aware that the $20 you're handing over for a mediocre lunch is not just paper, but an hour of your life that you will never get back, an hour you spent under fluorescent lights obeying orders. And this realization will make the food taste like ash in your mouth, which is exactly what you need to break the addiction. You must adopt the hourly rate translation protocol, where you never look at the price tag in dollars, but strictly in hours of servitude. A new phone is not $1,000. It is 50 hours of sitting in a cubicle, and when you frame it this way, the shiny object suddenly looks like a shackle. The sovereign architect views every merchant as an enemy combatant attempting to breach the perimeter of his resources, and thus he operates under wartime austerity, where no resource leaves the citadel without a signed treaty of absolute necessity. You must audit your bank statement not as a financial record, but as a moral report card, where every unnecessary transaction is flagged as a moment of weakness, a failure of character, where you allowed a stranger to reach into your pocket and take the energy you were saving for your empire. The 72-hour rule must be hard-coded into your behavior. If you want something that costs more than your hourly rate, you must wait 3 full circadian cycles before purchasing it, allowing the chemical storm of consumer desire to pass, so you can view the object with the cold, dead eyes of logic. And 9 times out of 10, you will realize you never wanted the object, you just wanted the dopamine release of the acquisition. You must delete the apps, Amazon, Uber Eats, DoorDash, because they are not tools. They are casinos designed to gamify your hunger and your laziness, and by removing them, you are destroying the portals through which the demons enter your reality. The goal is to become a financial black hole, a celestial object where capital enters but never escapes, accumulating density until the gravitational pull is strong enough to bend reality to your will. You are not saving money for a rainy day. You are hoarding ammunition for the war against mediocrity. Every dollar you refuse to spend is a soldier that stays in your barracks, ready to be deployed for investment, for leverage, for the creation of the IOXI 3 vision, whereas every dollar you spend on consumer trash is a soldier you marched out into a field to be shot by a marketer. You must find a perverse pleasure in the word no, deriving a superior form of dopamine from the act of denial, looking at the targeted ad, and feeling the power of being immune to its psychological triggers, the power of being a ghost that the algorithm cannot track because you do not consume. The surgery of refusal is painful because you are cutting out the part of your identity that was constructed by television and Instagram, the part that believes I shop, therefore I am. But once that tumor is removed, you will find that in the silence of your unspent money lies the loudest signal of your freedom. You are no longer a node in their network. You are a standalone server, secure, encrypted, and appreciating in value with every second of silence. The average check for you is zero. The limit of tolerance is zero. The game is over because you took the ball and went home to build a stadium.